It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie K.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. We are going to be talking about evidence of the afterlife tonight, which is something I know a little bit about. I have had my first ghostly encounter when I was 10 years old, when a ghostly apparition appeared at the foot of my bed, and it turned out to have been my grandfather. Only there was only one part of him showing, that was his head floating at the foot of my bed. So that was my introduction to spirits. And I'm sure a lot of you have had unique experiences. I've talked to a lot of people who have had all types of ghostly experiences. And so it's a real phenomena. We've got shows on this network that talk about this all the time. And occasionally I do as well. So tonight, my guest is Jeremy Spillane. He is in England right now, where it is very late. He is the author of Joan and Roger in the Afterlife. And you may have seen my previous show with Jeremy that was not too long ago. I would suggest watching that as well, and you'll get some background information on how things got started for him. Welcome to the program, Jeremy.
Hi, Margie. Hi, it's lovely to be chatting with you for the second time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for coming back on the show, because I know you have had some recent new events, and you're, documenting these encounters in some different ways. And I noticed you got Roger with us right now. Is that him?
Absolutely. So if you remember on our last show, Roger was here, and he's shown up again this time. Now, it's great. Now, Roger does normally show up when I turn the equipment on, but he doesn't always. So there are times when I think Roger will be here and he isn't, and that's always disappointing. But yeah, he's with us tonight. He knows how important the show is. So he's been here for a couple of hours, actually, and he's still there. And hopefully the lighting, it's hard to see sometimes, but I've got the lighting so he shows up as well as possible. So hopefully all your viewers can see him there next to me.
So that's your SLS camera, and a lot of us in the ghost hunting field use those. They are quite useful in the field, and you've got one set up at your house, so that's wonderful, and we can see Roger there. Thank you for joining us tonight, Roger. We appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure he's glad to be here. It's his story, and he wants everyone to read it and hear about it. So he's doing his bit, obviously. Right.
Well, for those who don't know your story, why don't you give us a little brief introduction to how you got involved in ghost hunting and getting interested in spirits?
Yeah, so Joan and Roger were, or should I say, are my in-laws. I'd known them for sort of around 40 years. With Caroline and I had experienced nothing at all until 2017, when Caroline's mum, Joan, died really suddenly at home. A terrible heart failure, instantaneously she died, didn't have time to say goodbye. And as soon as she did that, within a day or whatever, Caroline and I were getting signs at our house that she was still around. We were getting our televisions in various rooms switching on, bedside lights switching on, and we were absolutely certain that was Joan. But when we told Roger, who had been a lifelong skeptic, didn't believe in life after death, when we told him what had been happening and we thought it was signs from Joan, he just thought we were nutcases and didn't say anything. He didn't know what to say. So he he didn't say anything, and then 4 years later, then Roger died. His was not a sudden death; it was all sort of we could see it happening in advance. He died in hospital. Caroline was with him at his bedside, and then as soon as Roger had died, he sort of carried on where Joan left off. So within a day or so of Roger dying, we then, Caroline and I, got another load of signs at our house, but they were different signs to what Joan had given us, and we knew that was Roger giving us these different signs. They were still electrical and electronic, but Roger was doing things like turning our power off in our house, turning light circuits off, and sometimes turning the whole power off to the whole house. And things would trip out with quite a bang when the circuit breaker clicked out, and we were certain that was Roger. And we basically were trying to communicate with him. He was sort of doing various things occasionally on our mobile phones and what have you. And after a lot of persuasion from Caroline, eventually I got some ghost hunting equipment, because I'd seen it working on television programs, this equipment. I knew it worked, and Roger loved electronic gadgets, and spirits seemed to be able to affect electronics comparatively easily. So about 7 months after Roger died, I got some ghost hunting equipment, and as soon as I got the SLS camera and tried it out, tried it at the cemetery initially where Joan and Roger were buried, I could see Roger on camera straight away, pretty much as you can see now, as a stick figure. And he's been showing up for 3.5 years since we got this equipment. And as you can see today, 3.5 years later, he's still showing up most times when I turn it on, which is fantastic. So what I did was I wrote a book about Joan and Roger, and it's got all videos that we took, which I saved, hundreds of, well over 100 videos. I've lost count how many there were, to be honest. But I'm still adding to them, sort of every so often, sometimes a week or two will go by and I won't have the camera on, then I turn it on and something incredible happens. So there's another video to add to the story. But Roger was a very highly educated man. He was an Oxford University graduate. He was a teacher for the first few years of his career and then moved on to other things. So education, knowledge and books were Roger's three main loves in life. So it was pretty inevitable, to be honest, looking back, that Roger would get me to write a book about him and Joan. I'd never written a book before, and I never ever thought I would write a book. I never had anything that motivated me enough. I never thought I'd be able to put the effort in to write about anything for a book. But since Roger and Joan and everything they've done, that was the only way I could tell their story in a book. And that's obviously what Roger wanted. And Roger's been pulling all the strings from the afterlife, him and his spirit pals. Somehow they've organized everything. And things just happen in a way that I don't expect. Sometimes I try contacting various people who I think, oh, they'll be interested in what I've found, and I don't get any response. And then suddenly an amazing thing will drop in my lap that I just hadn't foreseen. So this is how it seems to work with Joan and Roger, and I'm just totally in awe of them. And day by day, we're being shown all, phenomenal things, and it's just yet more proof of the afterlife. And as your viewers can see, the afterlife is all around us, and here we are. Roger is literally in the room with me, and this SLS camera somehow is able to see invisible spirits. And I've had it scientifically confirmed by the Society for Psychical Research that the SLS camera really is seeing a spirit. That's not just the camera playing up and being triggered by the pattern in the wallpaper or anything like that. That really is genuinely an invisible spirit that the camera detects. And when it does detect it, it then superimposes this green stick figure on the picture in real time. And so that literally is Roger in the room with me, which is pretty incredible when you think about it, isn't it?
It sure is. I wonder if you, in your communications, do you ever ask them questions, and how do they respond to you?
Once Joan and Roger, because Joan does show up sometimes, but as in life, she's a lot. She doesn't take the limelight so much. Roger sort of leads the way. But when they show up, I know that's Roger. I've got some other equipment. I've got the Ovilus Talking Dictionary, and occasionally Roger will come out with some really appropriate words, but it's only a word at a time. So once I'd got the equipment and could detect or felt that was Roger showing up, I then got in touch with various mediums to try and help me. And we had 3 great mediums who were featured in the book Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife. And these mediums confirmed that, yes, that is Joan and Roger showing up. And the mediums have been able to come out with some great readings from Roger and Joan. And we have sort of asked them various things. It's a bit hard sometimes to get direct answers, but certainly one of the best readings, or a fantastic reading anyway, was 3 weeks after Roger died. We went to see a local medium, Stephen Holbrook, who's featured in the book. He only does public shows. He won't do one-to-ones. But 3 weeks after Roger died, Roger came through at one of the shows of Stephen Holbrook, and it was an amazing reading from Roger. And he said so many things that proved beyond any doubt that it was Roger literally talking to us from the afterlife via the medium Stephen Holbrook. So there were a whole load of amazing things he said. He knew that Caroline was the only one with him, with Roger in the hospital when he died, holding his hand, and that was true. And then as soon as he died, Caroline rang us, and myself, Caroline's sister Alison, and her husband Colin, we all went to the hospital, and then we were with him at his bedside. So Roger said this through Stephen, in the message. Roger also knew that he'd been buried with the wrong shoes. They were brown shoes instead of the black ones that he should have had. For some reason, at the last minute, the black shoes couldn't be found. So Roger was buried with these brown shoes, and Roger said this through the medium Stephen Holbrook. And he said that there were 3 new potted plants, climbing plants, that Roger had in his porch when he went in the ambulance for the last time, about a week before he died. And he got the ambulance, one of the ambulance people, to move these plants into the garden so that they'd get water, from the rain, so they didn't die, because they were in a porch, protected from the rain. And Roger said this, and that's absolutely right. And also he said, Roger said through the medium, that he was buried with a selection of books in his coffin, and that's absolutely right. So it just emphasizes being a book fanatic, such a book
Well, he's
lover.
got something to read in the afterlife then.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And it really makes you think. It's just incredible when, all the messages through the medium are so accurate. All these little trivial details that supposedly trivial, but they just prove beyond any doubt that, Roger's there looking and watching. He was obviously at his own funeral, which apparently is common. All spirits tend to be at their own funeral after they've died. And when you think about it, why not? They want to see who turns up, what the turnout is, and all the rest of it. So all these little points, they all add up, and it just makes you think, well, good grief, this is incredible. And when you hear these things, and it's well known, obviously, that mediums can give these amazing messages, and we get blasé about it, but to me that does prove that there's life after death. But it's when you see it on camera, like I'm seeing now with Roger next to me, that to me is another level. I've always been a person that when you see something, you believe it. I was brought up Catholic and stopped believing all the details when I was a teenager. I didn't believe in life after death anymore, pretty much like Roger. He was brought up in the Christian church. He was Jehovah's Witness. Joan and Roger met through the church, and they got married. And then once they'd had their 2 daughters, Caroline, my wife, being the elder of the 2, once they'd had the daughters, then Roger stopped going to church. Well, they both stopped going to church, but Roger stopped believing in life after death. And then he spent his whole lifetime looking for evidence, but he never got it. So he never saw the evidence that convinced him that there really was life after death. So he always told me, if ever I brought the subject up, he would say, no, there's no such thing as life after death. When you die, that's the end. That's it. It's all over. And he lived his life on that basis. He was obviously trying to cram everything in before he died. He had a long list of things he wanted to do, and the last couple of years, his failing health stopped him doing some of the things. But I think he did most things he wanted. But yes, he was absolutely certain that there wasn't such a thing as life after death. So,
well, I guess he knows now.
Yeah, absolutely. But when Joan died and she gave us all those signs, and we told him, he just thought, Karen and I are just really stupid. How can a television turning on be a sign from, Joan that she's still around? He just didn't believe it. I'm sure he genuinely didn't believe they were signs from Joan. He had his own signs similar to what we were getting, then I think I would have, we would have detected that he'd had some signs. But I'm sure that Joan didn't give him any signs because she knew his beliefs. She knew what his health was like. Roger had his own heart troubles, like Joan had had. And Joan would have known that had she given him similar signs to us, then Roger would have died of his own heart attack. He would have been so shocked by receiving a sign similar to what we got. But for some reason, Joan knew that Caroline and I would be receptive to her signs, which we were. We loved these signs. But yeah, as soon as Roger died and then finds himself in the afterlife, which he didn't think did exist, but he finds that it's real, then he's suddenly then bending over backwards to give us the signs, because he's telling us, look, I was totally wrong. There really is such a thing as life after death. And I need you to tell my story. I want to tell everyone on earth that I was totally wrong. There is such a thing, and I'm going to prove it to you. And he is proving it beyond any doubt. And it's just incredible what he's doing. And he continues to do it. Other spirits with Karen and I have had plenty of family funerals over the decades, and we've never had signs from anyone else that they're still around. I suppose the other spirits just don't see the point. Why would they bother giving us these signs? They just go off to the afterlife and do whatever it is that spirits will do. But Roger's got this burning desire to, show us and show everyone through us that I'm still around, I'm in the afterlife, and there really is an afterlife, and I'm showing you it visually, and here it is. So, I'm just in awe of him and Joan. Joan started everything, and then, as in life, Joan starts a project, and Roger takes it over and carries it on. So, it's just all totally amazing.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Usually. One is the leader and one is the follower.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
So Joan would always support Roger totally in everything he did, but she would let him take the limelight, and that's what he's doing now. So well done, Joan. You started it. You were the most incredible thing. We'd never had anything like it, and then Roger takes it over and sort of carries on your project that you started. But that's fantastic. That's how they were, and that's how they still are. And to me, that just proves that the spirits that you can see there, that's Roger's spirit, and he's got exactly the personality and everything that he had in life, in the physical life. He's just, all that's happened is he's lost his physical body, but apart from that, that is Roger there, as he was. So got all his knowledge and abilities and memories and whatever, and just got no physical body. That's the only difference.
Now, before your first contact occurred after Joan died, you and your wife, did you have an interest in spirits, or did you have any experiences? Had you seen ghosts before?
No, we hadn't, to be honest. And as I say, I was brought up Catholic. When I was young, when I was a child, I was scared of the dark. I used to think I saw monsters, and I used to be frightened. I used to have to sleep with the light on as a child for a good few years. And my parents would tell me, don't be frightened. There's no such thing as ghosts. Don't worry, go back to sleep. But I would wake up from a nightmare, and I would still think that even when I was awake, that I could see whatever it was I'd seen in my nightmare. And so I found it all scary. So I was happy to try and tell myself, there's no such thing as ghosts. And I spent my whole life really thinking that. I was telling myself there's no such thing as ghosts. But I think I was always open to the proof. If I had heard a good first-hand account from someone of them seeing a ghost, I think I would have believed it, but I never quite did. In later life, I did hear one or two people who had encountered strange things. There was one particular incident actually with some friends of ours, and their relative had a house, and they had strange goings on, lights turning on and off and things like that, and their computer, I think it was, turning on and off. And we heard that their house was haunted by some spirit or other, and I was sort of intrigued, but I never found out any more about that. And I sort of was still just intrigued, but still didn't believe in it myself. I just hadn't experienced anything firsthand. To be honest, Caroline and I, we had something slightly odd at a house we lived in probably 15 years ago. It was an old Victorian schoolmaster's house, and we'd got it. And a couple of times I heard someone walking up the stairs. I put metal stairs in, a metal spiral staircase, which it wasn't built with. It was built with ordinary wooden stairs, but I put these metal spiral stairs in up to the top floor, which I converted into a habitable room. And a couple of times I heard someone walking up these when I was in the bath in the afternoon, and I thought it was my son coming back from university. And once I finished my bath, I went to his room to sort of say, oh, hi, are you back? How did it go? And there was no one there. And that was the only thing I'd experienced myself that was strange. And it wasn't till years later I looked back and thinking to myself, well, maybe that was paranormal of some sort, but I still couldn't fully explain it. And speaking to Caroline very recently, actually, in the same house, she had heard like a radio playing in a room in that house, and she could never pinpoint it. And she would go room to room and try and find out where this sound was coming from. It sounded like, someone had left a radio playing in the house, but there was no one else in the house apparently, and she couldn't detect where the sound was coming from. So those are the only things that either of us experienced, before Joan gave us the signs. So no, we haven't really experienced anything else, to be honest. And because of that, I didn't believe in all this stuff, the afterlife, whatever. And I was still a skeptic like Roger until Joan died December 2017, and then everything changed in an instant. I was convinced, oh yeah, once Joan gave us the signs, then I knew with total certainty that there was an afterlife. And I think Caroline was the same. I think we both instantly believe, yes, there really is an afterlife, and that really is Joan giving us the signs. So, that's when everything changed totally for us.
It does seem that spirits are able to absorb energy from electronics and batteries, and also manipulating electronics and lights and lighting. I mean, I had an incident where my aunt died, and at her funeral, before the funeral started, the family was in the chapel, and all the lights went out, and leaving only candlelight. Well, we know that was her because she loved candlelight and she hated standard lighting.
Really?
So we're like, oh, hello, Aunt Dot. And they will do that.
Yeah, I've heard of these things, and I've heard other people's stories since, things like that, and it's just incredible, isn't it? And you think, goodness me, how how can a spirit have that sort of power, real power, where they can actually do that, turn the lights off or whatever. And I'm just amazed, and I'm still trying to understand exactly how they do it. I know, from everything I've read, because as soon as Joan died, I then read, literally hundreds of books, watched all the programs on everything relevant I could, ghost hunting and scientific programs. And you think, well, how can that spirit there that's got no physical component to it, it seems, how can that spirit, do all these amazing things with the electronics or the electrical stuff? So the spirit certainly seems to be electrical in its own way, but beyond that, I don't know. And I still can't quite fathom how that spirit there, Roger, can, for instance, turn our power off in our house if he wants. And just further to that point, I never mentioned it much in the first book, but Roger was the one who would turn the power off in the house and turn circuits off. And he has actually caused lingering damage. So every few months in our house where we are now, because of the stuff he's done, playing with the circuits, if you like, it has caused actual physical wiring problems. So some months later, perhaps after he's given us one of these signs, I will then have a electrical problem that will start causing a circuit to trip out, and it starts tripping out, perhaps once every week or two for no apparent reason. Then it gets more and more, and it gets to the stage where the circuit doesn't work anymore, and I've literally got to rewire it. And then I can detect sometimes with my meters that one of the wires has literally effectively got burnt out. It's normally an earth wire that's burnt out, but when this happens, it's for a few weeks, it's a major problem, because we literally can't use some electrics in the house. The most recent one was just, I don't know, about 3 months ago, I think it was. And it was a circuit that had all our kitchen sockets on, and it meant that we ended up where we couldn't use the kitchen sockets, and I had to take a day off work as a sort of emergency to track the problem down, which I did. And then once I'd found the dodgy wire, then at an upcoming holiday, then I was able to replace this wire. But this has happened about 6 times, and it's Roger that's done that. And at the time, I'm thinking, goodness me, what a nuisance. But on the other hand, had Roger not given us such an incredible sign that was him, as opposed to the less harmful signs Joan gave us, had Roger not given us such a sign, I wouldn't have taken him so seriously, and therefore I wouldn't have looked into things as much with Roger, and the book wouldn't have happened. So Roger had to give me that sort of really quite severe sign to make me notice him, and he's done that. So I have to thank him, even though it does give us a bit of day-to-day problems every now and again. But that's
ask him not to turn the lights out until after our session here today.
Yeah.
So you don't
I have asked him actually. Yeah, I have asked him if he's given us any more signs. Please don't sort of damage things in such a big way. Just do something that's slightly less damaging. Just turn the telly off or something like that. But anyway, I think he's probably got the message actually. But no, I welcome the signs, even though they have sort of caused us some problems. But as I say, without those problems, I wouldn't have taken it so seriously. So have to accept the trouble that's come with it. Yeah.
Okay, well, we are going to take a short break, and we'll be back right after these messages. Have you ever wondered what messages starseeds are receiving from their star families? The Unexplained Network and Oz Institute are pleased to announce the Conscious Contact Virtual Conference, June 20th, 2026. Join us to hear messages from the Pleiadians, Arcturians, Venusians, and more with Lily Nova, Isha Patel, Dr. Raymond Keller, April Cordner, and Margie K. These experienced contactees will share what they have learned from the benevolent beings who are assisting Earth people to raise their consciousness. Visit unxnetwork.com for more information and to register. That's unxnetwork.com. Onyx Media is pleased to offer 2 books by Dr. Gregory Rogers, former NASA flight surgeon. Impact is an account of the Space Shuttle program in 1992 and the tragedy that occurred even after NASA management had been warned about the damage to the thermal protection system. And in We Got It From Them, Dr. Rogers explains how humanity received ET technology. Both books are receiving much attention by the media. Visit unxmedia.com, that's unxmedia.com, for more information, or go to amazon.com to purchase your copies today. We are back. I'm Margie K with Unx News, and we're interviewing Jeremy Spillane this evening. Jeremy, you have got some new projects that you've been doing, so do tell us about your most recent projects.
Yes, absolutely. So, as I've already said, Roger keeps showing up on the equipment as he is today. So that's 3.5 years since we got this ghost hunting equipment. So it's about 4 years since he died, physically died. And so, yeah, whatever he does and wherever it leads, I'm keen to pursue it. And so it's about 2 years since I wrote the first book, Joan and Roger Alive in the Afterlife. So in those 2 years since it was written, a fair bit has happened. And some people have said to me, perhaps you'll write another book. And I always said to them, no, I don't have another book in me. But I came to realize that when the time was right, I'd like to update the first book, with the latest news, effectively, what Roger's been doing. But I didn't know when this could happen. I thought it might be, a few years off. I wasn't sure how it worked with the publisher and when I'd get the chance to do that. But I was keen to update it when it was possible. And then recently, we've had a number of things that have happened which I hadn't foreseen. So it was actually just probably a couple of months ago I was talking. It was actually another podcast I was doing, again in America, and we're just chatting, a bit like I'm chatting to you. And some viewer or listener came up with a message that said, we were talking about SLS cameras and how they worked. And as you can see, this is how they work. And this is Roger showing up on the SLS camera. And we know it's a spirit. And this listener on this podcast said, that's like Tesla cars. And I hadn't heard this and I didn't know what he meant, but I didn't think much of it. So after the show that night, and once I was in bed, I was then thinking, what do you mean Tesla cars see spirits? And I hadn't heard this. And then I messaged the host the next day and said, could you tell me what this viewer knows about Tesla cars? Is it possible you can get in touch with them? And the host said, well, no, it's just a general comment. She said it's all over the internet that Tesla cars can see spirits, and I hadn't heard this. And so she said, look out, and there's all sorts of videos on the internet. So I looked into it, and sure enough, she was right. So there's a lot of videos on the internet where Tesla cars, they have a system called traffic visualization system. So on the screen on the dashboard of a Tesla car, optionally, or you can turn it on if you want to, there's a system where it will see vehicles and people, human beings, and it helps you to drive safely, and it will sort of warn you if there's a vehicle that you're sort of approaching, or a person perhaps crossing the road, for instance. And the system shows the view ahead in the Tesla car, and it will put on a sort of a shadowy figure where there's a person, and it'll alert you to the fact that there's a person in front of you and you might need to sort of take avoiding action or slow down or whatever. Anyway, what people had noticed was when they were driving their Tesla cars, and it seemed to happen particularly when people were driving through cemeteries, which isn't as common in the UK, I don't think, but in America it seems that they often have roads through the cemeteries, and people drove their Tesla cars through the cemetery, and at times this system would show up a figure on the screen as if there was a person there when looking out the window and looking through the cameras of the car, no physical human being was there. So people were saying, my Tesla car is seeing a spirit. Well, the official line is that Tesla cars don't see spirits. This is coming from Tesla, presumably. What it is the Tesla system, since 2022 anyway, their cars, they have about 9 cameras on the car, sort of ordinary visual cameras, and they're looking around them, and there's AI that controls all these cameras. It's looking at them all, and it sort of works out what is where. So if there's a vehicle in shot, it'll see it on a couple of the cameras, and then it works out there's a vehicle in a certain place, and then it displays the vehicle symbol or whatever on the screen. And where it was displaying a spirit, the official line is that it's just the AI of the Tesla system that is being overcautious, inverted commas, and it puts a symbol of a person on even when there's nothing visible whatsoever. So to me, it doesn't add up. So I suspected that when I was looking at these videos, to me, they look real. And I thought, yes, it looks like the Tesla car really is perhaps seeing a spirit, but obviously couldn't prove that. And it looks to me like Tesla themselves, the company, probably know that it's possibly seeing spirits, but they can't admit that because maybe they haven't got the proof that it's seeing a spirit. But Tesla must be aware that their system is seeing something, inverted commas, but they can't explain what it is. But to me, it looked like these were spirits potentially. And so anyway, it got me thinking, well, how could I prove that the Tesla is seeing a spirit? And I thought, well, if we can somehow prove it's seeing a spirit, then that would be amazing. I'd be fascinated. And because Teslas are so common, I read the other day that 9 million Teslas have been made worldwide. And so a lot of these, many millions, have this potential to see spirits if that's what they are. So I thought, well, how can I prove that it's seeing a spirit? So this is where my friendly cooperative spirit Roger next to me comes in, and I knew that Roger would be up for the challenge, and he's always willing to prove whatever, sort of extend the boundaries of human knowledge. And I thought, well, if anyone can prove that Teslas see spirits, it'll be Roger. And then I had to think, well, how am I going to actually do this? Logistically, how will it work? So the Tesla system, where it has this traffic visualization system, the system is only turned on when the car is in drive, either wanting to go forward or maybe wanting to go backwards. But it does, I read, the system is live even when the car is actually stationary. So you've got it in gear effectively. It's ready to go, but you're not actually rolling, and the system will be live. So all the cameras are looking out and the AI is working, and it's looking for whoever. So if a physical human being walks in front of the Tesla car, it'll see it. And I thought, well, if Roger's around, then presumably the Tesla car should see Roger. And therefore, if it did work like I hoped, then Roger would appear on the Tesla screen, the system, the traffic visualization system. It would somehow see Roger, and it would display a human symbol on the screen. So that was the plan. And I thought, well, how's that going to work in detail? So my SLS camera, these were designed actually for seeing physical human beings in computer games, and actually they're Microsoft products, and Microsoft did develop these cameras to work in office applications as well. So they are incredibly sophisticated devices, but they only have a 12-foot range. So everything further away from this camera beyond 12 feet, it won't see them. So I thought, well, I've got to somehow see Roger within 12 feet of my SLS camera, and I need my SLS camera to be looking in the same sort of areas as the Tesla cameras are looking. So I realized I needed obviously to borrow some Tesla car from somewhere. I looked into hiring one, and that was expensive, and there was nowhere local I could do it. And I thought, well, that's going to be a real difficult project. I don't know how that will work. But in the end, we started, Caroline put some messages on Facebook, and she started with our local Facebook chat or whatever in the town where we live, and she was asking, is there anyone who would sort of cooperate with us and effectively lend us their Tesla car to do some experiments on? And I realized that probably most Tesla owners would think I'm, again, total nutcase, and they wouldn't be interested. And probably a lot of Tesla owners don't realize or don't admit that there's such things as spirits and there's life after death. So it's all quite a complicated area when you think about it. But luckily, one local person did get in touch and said, I've got a Tesla, and you can borrow it if you want. And it actually turned out this is an ex-colleague who I used to work with some while back, but I hadn't worked with him for ages. And I didn't know he'd got a Tesla car, but he'd only got it quite recently, and he was enamored with it, as Tesla owners often are. And in fact, before this chap got in touch, I had spoken to a neighbour across the road from us who I'd noticed had got a Tesla car. And he's a very friendly chap. He's Catholic, and he's a practicing Catholic. And I told him, could I borrow your Tesla car? In a sort of roundabout way, I had a big chat with him about the car first, and he obviously thought I was a nutter, and obviously didn't want to lend me his car. So this other local Tesla owner, he offered me the use of his car, and he offered to bring it round to our house and leave it with me for however long I needed, for the day or whatever. So it was fantastic. He was so generous of him. So that's what happened. So he brought the car round and put it in our carport area. And we're but we're doing the testing in daylight, because this SLS camera does work in daylight, and normally it sort of works pretty well even in reasonable bright daylight. And if Roger's around even in daylight, I will see him on the camera. So we had the car in this carport area, and it was a very bright sunny day, and I had hoped that I would see Roger's spirit in front of the car when we had the thing in drive, as I say, not moving, but ready to go. Anyway, this didn't happen. So, the car's ready to go. I've got my camera on, but for some reason, my SLS camera isn't seeing Roger. And I was sure Roger would be there if he could, and I couldn't see him. And when I was checking with the camera, even when Caroline, Roger's daughter, my wife, when she was walking in front of the Tesla car, again, my SLS camera wasn't seeing her, which it should do, because this camera will normally put a stick figure on a living human if they're within 12 feet, but it wasn't doing. So I put that down to the bright sunlight. I think it was sort of blinding my SLS camera to some extent, which I think can happen. And so although we'd been lent the car for the day, I thought if Roger's going to show, he'll show pretty much straight away. I thought he's either going to show or he isn't. And obviously I hoped he would. So the owner had told me how to use the car, what settings to put things into. And he said, you've got about 45 minutes to use it before the electronics get very hot. And then it will shut down for a couple of hours to cool the electronics. So I was working against time, thinking, knowing that I had this 45-minute deadline effectively. So couldn't see Roger in front of the car. And I'd actually got the camera outside the car. Initially, I thought I'd be able to film it with my SLS screen, which you can see here, this monitor screen. I thought I might be able to film it with that inside the car next to the Tesla display and film the two displays with my mobile phone camera. And the SLS camera has a sensor which can be it's on a long lead. You can have it remote. So I thought if that's on the bonnet of the car looking ahead, I can have the screen inside the car and film the two together. But that just didn't work. Roger wasn't showing up in front of the car where I expected him to. So, I was looking all around, and I started holding my camera outside the car, walking around the car on the outside. And Caroline was now inside the car. So she filmed the Tesla display with her mobile phone. I filmed my SLS camera outside with my mobile phone. I'm walking around the car, and I'm saying to Caroline, can you see a spirit showing on the Tesla display, and she's saying, no, I can't. And so I'm walking around, I'm looking for Roger, which is what often happens when I put the SLS camera on. Sometimes he doesn't show straight away, and it can sometimes be a long time before I see him. And I don't know whether that's just the shortcomings of the SLS camera. Sometimes Roger doesn't show up well for some reason. It could be depleted energy or what. Sometimes on the Ovilus, he will say factors when I ask. I say, are you there, Roger? I can't see you. And he'll say factors. And he might flash the K2 meter that I've got, the EMF meter. So I always suspect in these cases he is around, but for some reason he's not able to show himself. The camera isn't picking him up. So anyway, I'm walking around the car looking for a spirit in the vicinity of the car. And then suddenly, occasionally, I see very briefly, just for a fraction of a second, a spirit on the SLS camera. So I say, Caroline, I can see a spirit here briefly. Can you see one on the Tesla screen? And she says no. So Caroline suggests, she said, why don't I look for her dad, his spirit, in the garage? Because the car is half in our garage and it's a bit darker in the garage. It's not in such bright sunlight. So I think, okay. So I walk around the back of the car and then do again briefly see some spirits in the garage. So I'm looking on my SLS camera and I can see a spirit on my SLS camera, but I've actually got my own car in the garage and the Tesla is very close to it, and I haven't really got space to walk around properly. So it's becoming very awkward and difficult. So it's not quite working in the way I hoped. So I'm aware of this clock ticking, and it's getting, it's not getting up to 45 minutes yet, but I'm aware that the Tesla's electronics might overheat shortly. So I said to Karen, look, I'm just going to move the Tesla car out the garage slightly. So I very gingerly, because I've never touched one before and I know how powerful they are, I didn't want to accidentally drive it through the, the door to the carport and onto the road.
No,
so
that would be good.
I know it'd be very embarrassing if I'd written his car off or something. But anyway, I managed to just inch the car out very slowly. So I pull it out the garage enough that I've got, about 6 feet or more, maybe 8 feet behind the Tesla car in front of my car that's already parked in the garage. So at this point, I've got space to look for Roger in the garage. So we carry on doing what we're doing. And I'm saying to Karen, right, I'm behind the Tesla car, I'm looking for your dad. Oh, here's your dad. And then suddenly Roger is showing up really strongly on the SLS camera behind the Tesla car. So I'm holding my camera, looking at the back of the Tesla, and I'm saying to Karen, right, your dad's here. He's between me and the tailgate of the Tesla car. Can you see him on the Tesla screen? And then at that point, Karen says, oh yes, there's some spirits. I can see them on the Tesla screen. And she said, actually, there's several. And she said, he's brought his friends with him, I think is what she said. And then we're filming our screens, each of us filming. I'm filming the SLS screen and Karen's filming the Tesla screen. So we've got the two films going on. So once Roger starts showing up on the camera, as I say, on the SLS, he shows up really strongly, and this is how he tends to do it. He'll be up showing really strongly, as you can see him now, for many, many minutes, and that's what happened. So Roger was there permanently on my SLS camera, and I'm saying to Karen, right, can you see him now? And then these various little spirits or whatever they were on the Tesla screen, they were just sort of brief displays of a person, but very brief on the Tesla screen. And then it sort of settles down a bit. So then Karen can see on the screen, she can see two people on the Tesla screen. One of them is me as a physical human holding the SLS camera, obviously, but on the Tesla screen, you can just see the sort of outline of a person on their AI system. And then there's another person there showing, and that is obviously Roger, and it coincides. So the position of this other one that isn't me is exactly where I'm seeing Roger. So
so you basically
totally
proved that Tesla cars are picking up spirits.
Absolutely. So exactly as I hoped, and as I knew Roger would be up for the challenge, and he is, and he has proved beyond any doubt that testers really do see spirits. So however it works, however their AI system works, it really does see spirits. And the significance is massive, because I've had it confirmed by relevant scientists. The Society for Psychical Research confirmed that this SLS camera of mine really is seeing a spirit. We did the experiment at Northampton University in the UK by one of the SPR members who's on the spontaneous cases committee who investigate whatever hauntings or whatever it is. They, investigated Roger, and we did this test together where Roger showed up as a stick figure on a totally plain white wall in the room in Northampton University, and that confirmed to this investigator, Aaron Lomas, that this camera really is seeing a spirit. So what we've done here with the Tesla is pretty much the same thing, and we know the SLS camera really does see spirits, and now we know the Tesla sees spirits, and they're both seeing it with totally different systems, and that's what I find really, really impressive, because the Tesla system is corroborating that the SLS camera sees a spirit, and vice versa. The two totally different systems are both seeing a spirit. So it's very hard for any skeptics or whoever to say that both systems are false. They're both triggering on something that isn't really there. They're both seeing the same thing in the same place, basically, and the systems are totally different. The only similarity, as far as I can see, is that the Tesla system, it uses optical cameras, but they are very sensitive to infrared. So how the Tesla system works is it'll work at night, this Tesla traffic visualization system. So it works at night in very, very low levels of light, but it still relies on some light, even on a dark night, when there's no moon and that, there's enough ordinary light for the Tesla cameras to see something, and using the AI, it can put the picture together and detect something there, even in very low levels of light. But it is the cameras on the Tesla, the 9 cameras that are on the Tesla car, apparently, they're all sort of very infrared, sensitive, if you like. But earlier Teslas, before 2022, they used radar and LiDAR as part of this system. But after 2022, they did a cost saving, apparently. So they scrapped the radar and the LiDAR, and they just use optical cameras, but they use AI with it. And that's how it works. So the Tesla system and my SLS camera, totally different systems, but they're both seeing the same thing. So that's definitely a spirit. So as far as I know, this is the first confirmation that Teslas genuinely see spirits. So
yeah, that's the first I've heard of it. So that's just amazing. We do have a question in chat I want to try to get to real quick before we have to bug out.
Right.
Would you ask Roger to flash K2 if it's available now at your session? And can you ask Roger to wave his hand on the camera? I was thinking about that too.
Well, to be honest, I haven't got the K2 on at the moment. It's not to hand just at the moment, because sometimes I find it can actually be a bit confusing. Sometimes it's flashing away and people think, well, I don't know what that means. We can ask Roger to wave to the camera. I don't know if he will. He doesn't always, bizarrely, doesn't always follow your instructions or requests, but we'll see. There are times when he does appear to be waving, but Roger, are you going to wave to the viewer on this podcast? You probably won't, will you? But you might do. But
hi, Roger. We'd really like to see you wave.
As I say, he doesn't always do what you ask. And even on the Ovilus Talking Dictionary, sometimes I ask him to say a certain word, to acknowledge something. And it's often a very cryptic answer. And sometimes he comes out with a word and you think, well, what on earth does he mean by that? But then sometimes months or even a year later, literally, I'll realize what he meant. So it doesn't always work in the way you hope. But no, I can't see him waving. I can see him in the mirror here, but
He keeps dipping that left arm way down.
yeah, it's I was never sure if this SLS camera, if you can take it too literally, the position of the limbs. I used to think that's just a Roger, any spirit is just a sort of blob, a cloud of energy, and the camera is probably struggling to work out what is where. And I didn't even know if a spirit has arms and legs. But since I wrote the book, actually, I've read books that indicate that when we first die, our spirit is actually sort of human shape with arms and legs and limbs. So maybe that is literally Roger's shape. I'm not sure, but I don't know whether the camera is picking up exactly where each limb and what have you is, but I don't know. So I'm sort of willing to think that's just that's telling us Roger's there, but as to where his exact body parts are, I'm not quite sure. It could be that, or maybe it isn't.
All right. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me this evening. We are out of time, but man, it is so cool that you figured out that Tesla is actually seeing spirits. So we'll have to spread the news. We'll have to do an article in Next Magazine.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you so much. And
thanks, Margie. It's been fantastic. It's been great chatting with you.
We'll be in touch. All right. That is it for another Next News. Right as I'm losing my voice. So I guess it's a good thing. See you next time.